Hey guys, welcome to The Strong Young Man. Our evolution as a species has depended on the creation of tremendous diversity of genetics, skills, and ways of thinking. Society thrives when the collective activity of people supply their individual talents to help build a society. Without such diversity, a culture dies. Our times emphasise equality, which is desirable if we are talking about equal opportunity and equal civil and human rights. Unfortunately, modern society is yet again mistakenly insisting that humans should have equality of outcome. Equality of outcome actually comes at the expense of equality of opportunity and of equal civil and human rights, and that is why it is pure evil. To promote the most prosperous society, we should nurture and foster the growth of everyone to the same degree and allow the natural abilities and personal inclinations to vary accordingly. Fostering the growth in our youth to an equal degree will help us continue the diversity that enabled Western society to come from a horse and cart to the internet in under 100 years. Conversely, equality of outcome is an atrocious ideology that incites murder, torture, deliberate starvation, enslavement, and genocidal extermination, as seen in the 20th century. Understanding this truth and the proof behind it, as outlined in today's episode, will assist you in accepting that life is not fair. Then you can begin to manipulate this reality to your advantage, which completes the lesson from episode 12. You will see the beauty and the necessity behind hard work, and that in order to thrive in capitalism, you must work hard, because you earn what you work for. It will enable you to stop making excuses for your failures and accept the cards that life has dealt you and learn to play the best hand that you can with what you have. This will help you achieve the most prosperity in the most prosperous society. Following on from this, you can encourage other people who have a superior ability in their specialised domain to chase excellence, so you can benefit from their rich contribution to our culture. Prosperity stimulates prosperity in this environment, and you too will win as long as you put in the work. Here's what you need to know. Equality of outcome does not stand up to the most basic understanding that there is genetic variability across all animals and species in the animal kingdom, including humans. Genetic variability means that people behave differently, have different abilities, and sort themselves into different categories. Anyone who argues that we are born with no predispositions whatsoever and that we should be equal in all regards is ignoring a mountain of evidence from various scientific disciplines. Ignorant individuals make the mistake of believing that everyone is born equal and that any inequality expressed or manifested is due to systemic discrimination. This is known as the blank slate theory, and it's a complete and utter fallacy that invites contempt for the principles of democracy. The theory that humans are shaped entirely by their experiences and not by any pre-existing biological mechanisms is incorrect, and it opposes our current understanding of human genetics. The blank slate theory is an anti-life, anti-human theoretical abstraction that denies us our common humanity, our inherent interests, and our individual preferences. Humans are shaped by both genetics and environment, nature and nurture. When you push for equality of outcome, you neglect to acknowledge that some people do certain things better than others. These naturally talented people produce more output for the same labour. Treating everyone equally means ignoring their differences, elevating the less skillful, and suppressing those who excel. To reward the talented the same as the untalented actually forces more inequality on everyone. If we don't reward the talented, they'll become resentful and disown their work. We see the same resentment in socialist republics that attempt to enforce equality of outcome. This will result in less output from the hardest working members of society. The result being that society does not develop as fast and efficiently and is conquered by another society, or that it succumbs to poverty and starvation. One example of this is the 20th century Russian policy aimed to integrate individual landholdings and labour into collectively controlled farms. It was expected that the replacement of productive individual peasant farms by collective ones would immediately increase the food supply for the urban population, increase the supply of raw materials for the processing industry, and increase agricultural exports via state-imposed quotas on individuals working on collective farms. So Lenin coerced the productive peasant farmers into giving up their land to make way for these collective farms or risk being killed, deported, or sent to gulag prison camps. 5 million productive peasant farmers and their families were subsequently deported, and the inexperienced peasants from urban areas would then replace the missing workforce. Some peasants resisted the forced labour, and most who didn't were inefficient farmers, and hence crop yields declined. Another issue that stemmed the yield of agriculture was that the tractors promised to the peasants could not be produced due to similar policies producing low output in the industrial sector of the Soviet Union. Consequently, somewhere between 4 to 7 million people died of starvation. Communist efforts to collectivise agriculture and eliminate independent property account for the biggest death toll under Stalin's rule. This is why equality of outcome is a disaster. Individual talent should be fostered, and the people willing to do the work should be rewarded the way they deserve to be, because the entire world benefits. Wealth is not a zero-sum game. Society can grow richer as a whole, as seen in Western civilization in the 20th century. Yes, the income gap between the rich and the poor has increased, but people living in poverty today are wealthier than the middle class were 50 years ago. Everyone has benefited. Contrast this with the smaller income gap of a communist society that results in poverty and starvation. For a more recent example of this, check out the starvation in North Korea. It is better to live poor in a capitalist society where you can change your circumstances than to live anywhere under a communist regime. You can determine the outcome by putting in the hard work. Ideologues that preach equality of outcome refuse to concede our biological tendencies, because if natural abilities exist, then true equality of outcome is unattainable. This denial allows them to continue to chase ideals of equality of outcome and then blame the system when it fails to produce equality of outcome. The preemptive assertion that it is the system that is the cause of these consequences prevents us from considering the possibility that there might be something else causing these outcomes. The collective responsibility of the problem is put on society, despite the facts and evidence indicating that the problem might be elsewhere. Assigning responsibility to an individual or a group oppressing the other when its existence is not oppressive nor causing the outcome will mean that the root cause of the problem will never be identified, and if a problem is found, it cannot be solved. There are individuals that complain about hierarchies that a capitalist society produces. Any hierarchy creates winners and losers. The winners are likely to justify the hierarchy, and the losers to criticise it. It must be noted that whenever the pursuit of excellence is undertaken, you create a hierarchy, a seed ranking in tennis, for example. Even if there is no formality, there is always a subconscious hierarchy. Even in a communist regime, they still have hierarchies. We cannot deny that some individuals just do things better than others. This is what gives life meaning. It's a good thing to do something that you are good at. You are allowing society to benefit maximally from your innate ability. It's a good thing to have others in society that do things better than us. We can rely on them to provide something for us that we cannot get for ourselves. This kind of exchange should be encouraged and not suppressed in order to attain equality of outcome. Exploiting individual talents for the benefit of society is what enabled people like Henry Ford to build the motor car, Albert Einstein to derive formulas, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates to develop technology, and Marie Curie to discover radium. The diversity of people's abilities operating in a balance creates a rich environment which fosters growth and development of the culture. Historically, the healthiest and most celebrated cultures were the ones that encouraged and exploited the greatest internal diversity amongst individuals. Ancient Athens, the Song dynasty, and the Italian Renaissance are all examples of this. This can be contrasted with the dictatorships of the 20th century, such as Nazi Germany, the Empire of Japan, and the Italian Social Republic. Equality of outcome is communism. Striving for equality of outcome has been the single biggest catastrophe in the history of humanity. It has killed more people in the last 100 years than all the previous wars and crusades combined. Eventually, under this regime, nothing is worth living for. The people eventually turn inward, and the society becomes a victim of its own inadequacies. The failure to encourage diversity and exploit individuals for their abilities removes accountability for the untalented and removes the incentive the talented need to work hard and give back to society. To illustrate just how bad equality of outcome really is, besides the 100 million bodies last century, let's pretend that we need to push for equality of outcome in a job field. Let's take nursing as an example. You have 10 places to fill for a summer internship and 1,000 applicants. 995 applicants are female and 5 applicants are male. The numbers may not be exactly like this, but they will be skewed this way due to the overwhelming proportion of women in nursing. Note that I'm not criticising this. I actually think it's a good thing. The feminine traits common among women, such as empathy and nurturing, means they make excellent carers. So you have 10 places to fill and 1,000 applicants, 995 female and 5 male. Because you are forcing equality of outcome, to fill the 10 positions, you must select 5 females and 5 males. The 5 males are guaranteed the job, while only 5 out of 995 females have an opportunity to get the job. Is this fair? It's certainly not equality of opportunity. Everyone applying for the position should have a 1 in 1,000 chance of receiving a job offer, increased or decreased by their natural ability to nurse, and not by their gender. Let's consider that in order to run the safest and most practical hospital, you need to select the best nurses for the job. The probability that these 5 males are also in the top 10 best candidates is practically impossible, especially when you consider that generally women have a genetic advantage when it comes to caring for people. We should not operate under the assumption that there ought to be some kind of gender parity between the sexes. Rather, we should celebrate in our differences and play to our genetic strengths. Let's carry over the same concept to engineering, a male-dominated field. By preventing the best candidates from receiving a job offer in order to force equality of outcome, you could be preventing some of the brightest minds of the future from developing some of the most amazing technologies. As Jordan Peterson has previously mentioned, gender is just one category in which we can equalise outcome. What if we imposed a requirement that we had to ensure that every category of prejudice was represented in every company in the exact proportion they were represented in the population? This is impossible because there's an infinite number of categories that you can group people by, and the categories cross over each other. And even then, it's impossible to have equal representation of every one of those groups all at the same time, especially if you take it to the level of wanting to have the balance met at every single level of the hierarchy within that company. In social experiments in the last 10 years, we have discovered that the difference in biology is expressed larger in egalitarian countries, where men and women are given equal opportunities to freely choose things like career, hobbies, etc. When a society moves to equalise men and women and the roles that they play, the environmental differences decrease and the innate and genetic differences are allowed to manifest more clearly. These countries are also, not totally coincidentally, the most productive and prosperous economies. This confirms indisputably that equality of outcome and equality of opportunity cannot exist at the same time. They are completely conflicting ideologies. People should have the freedom to choose exactly what they want to do, based off their likes, interest, and natural abilities, unencumbered by the restrictions that equality of outcome imposes on society. Equality of opportunity is what creates this freedom. When we allow people this same opportunity, they are able to compete to create a hierarchy that rewards them based on merit. This forms the basis of a meritocracy. The concept of hierarchies has been around since the beginning of time, in humans and in nature, and is a substrate for a well-functioning society. We must encourage this structure by giving people the same opportunities and letting people sort themselves into a hierarchy of competence in every aspect of life. Equality of outcome does not allow for this, and that is why equality of outcome is so destructive to a well-functioning society. None of the content presented in today's episode is a new concept. Many great minds before me have drawn the same distinction. I can't understand why we readily discard prior knowledge under the pretense that we live in a different time. Ernst Mayr was so far ahead of his time when he concluded that denying human variability was reprehensible. His contention was that many individuals do not have the moral fortitude to understand that genetics cause differences that result in inequalities that get expressed between individuals. People need to understand that this does not mean that people were not provided with equal civil rights and opportunities. Everything else in the animal kingdom displays genetic variability, and humans are no exception. Morally corrupt individuals contend that everyone is born equal, and then they label the differences that manifest as systemic discrimination, targeted at oppressing certain individuals. An ideology based on such obviously incorrect premises can only lead to disaster. People are different. Allow them equal opportunity, and they will shine according to their genetic potential. English naturalist and biologist Charles Darwin had a thought on this too. If the misery of the poor were caused not by the laws of nature, but by the institutions, great is our sin. But if people in different positions are mistakenly thought to be the same, then we might envy the rewards they've earned fair and square, and might implement coercive policies to hammer down the nails that stick up. I sure hope people understand that cutting down the tallest poppy limits the growth of the entire field to the smallest poppies. It eliminates some of the most beautiful and thriving characters that contribute to a rich culture. Understand that you cannot make the other poppies grow to be as tall as the tallest poppies. The rarity of the individual talents mean that they spread according to the Pareto distribution. Because of this, the top 1% need to be cut down to the size of the other 99% to force equality of outcome. This can be explained by using economics. The richest 1% own 43% of the wealth in the world. These people have worked so hard and taken so much risk to be successful. You cannot make your average person achieve the same level of success because it is impossible to bring the remaining 99% up to the level of the 1%. To redistribute the wealth equally, the top must be cut down, and this is to actively discriminate against the successful. Economist Friedrich Hayek was also wise enough to see the problem with this discrimination. He said, "It is just not true that all men are born equal. From the fact that people are very different, it follows that if we treat them equally, the result must be inequality in their actual position, and that the only way to place them in an equal position would be to treat them differently. Equality before the law and material equality are therefore not only different, but are in conflict with each other, and we can achieve either the one or the other, but not both at the same time." It takes extreme backwards thinking to understand that treating people different according to their inequalities allows us the greatest level of equality for everyone. Not everyone is intelligent enough to think this way. Not everyone is willing to read historical texts to view the problems with equality of outcome. People would rather arrogantly dismiss history as a relic of the past, not relevant to the technological advances of the 21st century. Failure for humanity to learn the lessons from the wisdom of history leaves us open to repeating the same mistakes. As historian Paul Johnson famously said, "The study of history is a powerful antidote to contemporary arrogance. It is humbling to discover how many of our glib assumptions, which seem to us novel and plausible, have been tested before, not once, but many times, and in innumerable guises, and discovered to be, at great human cost, wholly false. Almost every act considered evil by others that has ever been committed has been committed under the pretense of goodness. Good for oneself, good for one's family, good for one's community, Good for one's country? Or good for humanity? Evil that arises out of ordinary thinking and is committed by ordinary people is the norm, not the exception. There are so many more examples of great minds who truly knew what was best for the greater good, but this episode will go on forever, and I hope you get the point by now. US Presidents Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln, and philosophers such as Robert Nozick, Noam Chomsky, Isaiah Berlin, and Karl Popper all align with the same ideology if you are interested in more literature. Rather than go on, I'll finish with a bit of wisdom from perhaps the greatest philosopher of all time, Aristotle, in his text Politics, Book 3, Section 1284a. If there is any one man so greatly distinguished in outstanding virtue, or more than one, but not enough to be able to make up a complete state, so that the virtue of all the rest and their political ability is not comparable with that of the men mentioned, it is no longer proper to count these exceptional men as part of the state, for they will be treated unjustly if deemed worthy of equal status, being so widely unequal in virtue and in their political ability, since such a man will naturally be as a god among men. Hence it is clear that legislation also must necessarily be concerned with persons who are equal in birth and in ability, but there can be no law dealing with such men as those described, for they are themselves a law. Indeed, a man would be ridiculous if he tried to legislate for them, for probably they would demand that all should have equality. Thanks for watching today's episode. In episode 62, I'll run through how to cure all your gut problems. Subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when it drops. Catch you then.